This is Jim Fetzer of James Fetzer News with Kevin Barrett, who is the founder of Muslims for 11Truth. Kevin, yesterday was a big day for architects and engineers, and I know you participated in their event. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers for 11Truth, was putting on a big press conference in San Francisco to announce that they have surpassed the 1,000 mark of professional signers on their petition, calling for a new investigation of the apparent controlled demolition of the 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers on September 11, 2001. People all over the world were holding press conferences in support of Richard's in San Francisco. So here in Madison, Wisconsin, a bunch of us, about a dozen of us, showed up at the state capitol, and Tom Spellman, an architect who's on the board of Architects and Engineers, read their prepared statement. We didn't have any professional media come out, despite having inundated them with press releases, but we did get We Are Change Oshkosh down there. After the event in the state capitol, we moved on to Senator Herb Kohl's office across the street. And there we met with a young man named Ryan, his staff assistant. We spent about half an hour with Ryan, talking to him about this issue. He seemed to be paying serious attention to it. We left the petition there for Senator Kohl, who was flying in from Washington, D.C. later that day. And then we went on to the other side of the Capitol to Tammy Baldwin's office. She's the congressional rep here. And unfortunately, her office was closed for the week, so we slipped the petition under the door, along with a note saying that we would be in touch with her.
Kevin, I think that because these are engineers and architects who understand the design and construction of buildings, that their opinions about these matters are of considerable weight. Would you agree?
Indeed, and they're not just of considerable weight, but they're also very, very useful to the 9/11 Truth movement, which in the early years had only a couple of brave engineers like Jeff King coming out and supporting what we were saying, which is really not that complicated. It's not rocket science. It's kind of middle school physics. Buildings don't come down symmetrically at free fall speed for reasons other than controlled demolition, and there are a lot of reasons for that. But for years and years, the lack of a sizable body of professionals and experts made it much harder for us to present this argument convincingly to skeptics, who, of course, have no arguments other than ad hominem attacks and insults. Those are easy to throw at people who are not experts and professionals, but once you've got 1,000 architects and engineers saying the same thing, it becomes a bit harder to use those insults convincingly.
Kevin, even in San Francisco, some of your reception has not been warm and fuzzy. Here from the San Francisco Citizen, for example, the headline is 9/11 Truth Crazies return to San Francisco like swallows to Capistrano. And the piece begins, well, it's getting close to springtime. So leave us welcome back Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, who chose San Francisco as the place to launch their late winter offensive 2010. This strikes me as quite bizarre. Have they nothing else to say than ad hominem attacks?
Well, that is also bizarre that it sounds like they're subtly attacking San Francisco as well as the architects and engineers. But it's true that those arguing against 9/11 Truth don't seem to have any actual arguments relating to the evidence or to logic. So all they can do is panic and ridicule us.
Another piece in the same publication it has the statement by the author that to his mind, the planes loaded with jet fuel brought about the destruction of the towers. What do you and architects and engineers have to say in response to that?
Well, the idea that jet fuel could have brought down these buildings in the way they disappeared was actually implanted in people's minds on 9/11 itself by a number of high-level scientists who appeared on television and told us that the jet fuel would have melted the steel, causing these buildings to come down. In fact, jet fuel is a carbon-based fossil fuel. It's just kerosene, and it can't burn any hotter than a little over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a full 1,000 degrees less than what it would take to melt steel. And in fact, NIST tested the steel from the floors of the building where the plane impacts happened, where the fires were, and they found that Virtually none of that steel had even gotten above 500 degrees Fahrenheit, with only a couple of pieces getting somewhat hotter. And yet NIST went ahead and, without any evidence, against their own evidence, they imagined that the steel had reached nearly 1,800 degrees, which is the maximum theoretical temperature for an open-air fire. How such an open-air fire would ever get a framework of steel anywhere near that temperature remains a mystery, but they had to do that to get their computer model to show not even a collapse, but just the loss of vertical support on a couple of floors, which is all they were able to show.
In fact, actually, Kevin, since the melting point of steel is 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit, even 1,800 degrees, which is the highest possible with a kerosene fire, would be 1,000 degrees short. And as you know, Underwriters Laboratory certified the steel used in the building for 3 to 4 hours at 2,000 degrees without suffering any adverse effects, neither weakening nor melting. These fires, it would appear, could have burned forever at 500 degrees and done no damage to the building.
Well, that's right. And Kevin Ryan of Underwriters Labs ended up losing his job when he blew the whistle on that. Steel certified for several hours at 2,000 degrees obviously is not going to just disappear and form perhaps pools of molten steel in the rubble, as many eyewitness accounts indicate happened. So there are so many different ways in which this official story of what happened to these three buildings is ludicrous. And it's great that we've got 1,000 professionals stepping forward and saying so.
Well, I worry about those writing for San Francisco Citizen that they don't know any more about the case than they appear to display in their writings. For example, Building 7 did not come down until 5:20 in the afternoon. It was a 47-story structure and exhibited all the characteristics of a classic controlled demolition. Explosion sequence from the bottom up. All the floors fell together in about 6.5 seconds, equivalent to free fall. There was a stack of pancakes 5 to 7 floors high when it was done.
Well, that's right. And most people who've actually seen and thought about that collapse of Building 7, which in fact was announced a bit prematurely by the BBC, come to the conclusion that there's something wrong with the official story. And many of those people then just stop there. But the brave ones continue ahead and end up joining the 9/11 Truth movement.
Now, Kevin, even San Francisco Citizen should understand that Building 7 was not hit by any commercial carriers and had no jet fuel-based fires.
Well, they should. And if they know how to use Google, they should be able to find a video of the landlord, Larry Silverstein, essentially confessing to the controlled demolition of this building, from which he gained a $750 million profit.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. It's fascinating. And if they look at Google, too, they can check out This Is an Orange, a classic YouTube study of the destruction of Building 7 by Anthony Lawson. And if they compared it with the alternative 9/11, The Towers of Dust, that Nick Irving prepared, they'll understand that the way the Twin Towers were destroyed was completely different than what happened to Building 7.
Yes, the towers seem to have been blasted to talcum powder-style dust with some sort of high-energy mechanism, presumably including nanothermite explosives, these high-energy advanced military explosives, chips of which, unexploded chips of which, have been found in all dust samples from the World Trade Center.
Kevin, whether or not thermite is enough to explain the pulverization of the building, certainly the discovery of those chips must be considered to be sufficient to call for a reinvestigation of the events of 9/11.
Absolutely. The finding thermite in a destroyed building is considered prima facie evidence of arson. And this was, I would say, a little bit more than arson.
Kevin, I wanted you to know that I have signed the petition for architects and engineers, and I encourage others to do so, because the American people are entitled to know the truth about what happened on 9/11, an event that has been manipulated for political purposes to restrict our liberties and launch these wars in violation of international law, the UN Charter, and even the U.S. Constitution.
Well, good for you, Jim. I've signed it too, and I think I urge all your listeners and viewers to sign it as well.
Kevin, I can't thank you enough for your good work, and I would just mention that there's several studies about the destruction of the towers on my blog as well at jamesfetzer.blogspot.com. Kevin, I congratulate you for your good work, and architects and engineers for all of their efforts to bring about a more just and sane society.
Thanks, Jim.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host from James Fetzer News, concluding my interview with Kevin Barrett, the founder of Muslims for 9/11 Truth.